We are live on YouTube.
No. Just play Paradise.
So you film the speakers with your iPhone? Yeah, good. So it goes up in one of those little squares.
Right, yeah.
Great.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will call this meeting to order and begin by acknowledging with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish. People have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding Nickleelaham, Bowen Island. Welcome to the Bowen Island Municipality, Monday, June 24th, 2024, and thank you for joining. I'm Andrew Leonard, the Mayor of Bowen Island Municipality and the chair of this meeting. I'd like to introduce the other elected members of our council here today, for those of us that are joining for the first time, either in person or online. Starting on my right, we have Councillor and Islands Trustee Sue Ellen Fast. To her left is Councillor and Islands Trustee Judy Getty. To my far left is Councillor John Saunders. To his right is Councillor Tim Wake. And to his right is Councillor Alison Morse. We are also joined by members of our professional staff team here this afternoon who may be presenting and making reports, including our Chief Administrative Officer, Liam Edwards, our Corporate Officer, Sophie Insignia, as well as other members of staff you can see here today.
So Jorgensen has just joined us.
Oh, and Councillor Jorgensen has just joined us on Zoom, so you may see him on the screen behind me. This meeting is being recorded, and when members of the public speak during the public comment and question and answer period of the meeting, your presence and voice will be included in the permanent recording, which will be available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca, as well as on our YouTube channel, where it will live in perpetuity. This council meeting is an official forum for the conducting of the business of local government. We all love our community. We are all passionate about what happens here. I would encourage everyone to maintain a constructive and respectful tone during the meeting and to direct any comments and questions during the public comment or question and answer periods of the meeting to myself. For those that are following along here or online, the agenda and full council package meeting for this afternoon is available at bowenislandmunicipality.ca. And with that, I will look to the corporate officer for the addition of any late items to our agenda.
Just a correction to one of the items on the agenda in item 7.4, we've replaced attachment 4. There was just a mistake there in the attachment that was uploaded to the agenda and bylaw 659. So that was circulated by email earlier, and we'll fix that on the agenda after this meeting.
Thank you. And with that, I'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Wake, seconded by Councillor Fast. Seeing no discussion, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. Moving on to public comments, I'll look to the corporate officer for how many public comments do we have today?
Just one today, and that's Laura Percy and Alice Sogstead.
Right. Join us up here at the front.
Hey. Nice to see you all. Thanks for letting me speak today. I'm Alan Sogstead. I run the Island Discovery Learning Community, and I've done that. This is exactly 20 years that we've been doing this. Kind of crazy that I've been doing this for so long. Didn't really realize that at the start when we were at the Collins Hall many years ago. Yeah, it's been 20 years since we've done this, and we finally have a place that we really like. That feels like it really works for us. It's surrounded by nature. We have neighbors that are really supportive of us. Not very many neighbors, which is great too. Yeah, so we've had a TUP. We did a TUP 4 years ago. We got approved for that. We renewed that TUP last year. And through discussion with staff we've known that council would love TUPs to eventually go towards a rezoning process. So we are putting in for rezoning of the property now. We have the blessing of the owner of the property for that. So I just wanted to introduce that idea to you. I know it's in your agenda later today. Just so you know, we have about 50 or 60 kids that come to IDLC. It's been about the exact same number for really about almost 10 years now. We aren't really growing. We're not really shrinking. I'm always worried every year, are there going to be new kindergartens on island still? Are there still going to be young families? And sure enough, they keep turning up, which is really lovely. But we serve a bit of a niche population. Our school's only part-time. They're home part of the week. We expect family involvement and commitment, so that it's a high level of family involvement at our school. And it's a very gentle family-based structure. And I think the thing what we really do well in is that because it's so small and gentle, it really serves neurodiverse children. A large portion of our kids are neurodiverse, and that small, really supportive setting is a real godsend to them, I think. Right. And so it's a alternative program, but I think it serves a great need on Bowen and is fairly valuable to a lot of families over many years. So this rezoning of our property, what we're really hoping, and the landlord is hoping, is that it's just really for our use, our continued use as exactly the way we do it now. We don't have any grand plans for any big new things there. It's just to do what we're doing now. We have an occupancy of 30 per day. It's just to keep it small, and do what we've always done. And even the idea is that it would only be for our use, that we couldn't be kicked out into some big giant university going there, or we fold and then this landlord is stuck with a school zoned property. It's really just for us while we're operating. If we disappear, that it would revert back to residential is the idea. I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but that was the thinking around that. And then anyway, that's really all. Just hoping to connect. If any of you want to come out for a visit, you're more than welcome. I'm happy to connect over the phone and answer any questions you have about what we do and how we do it and how we can really serve Bowen and work in a harmonious way with all our neighbors and other community organizations.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council, or questions actually? See none. Thank you for coming today.
Thanks, everybody.
That's it for public comments. Moving on to delegations, we have Elaine Cameron from the Bowen Island Food Resilience Society regarding a request for municipal partnership for prosperity fund.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us, Ms. Cameron.
As the mayor just said, we're here to ask for your agreement to partner with us, and I'm going to explain a little bit about the project. Before I do that, I want to introduce Rodney Wilcox, who is very involved with the Low Hanging Fruit Project, and Phil Drapery, another Bowen Island Food Resilience Society board member, whom some of you may know from his championing of the pesticide ban, which is turned into a bylaw now for the municipality. The project that we want you to partner with us on is called Low Hanging Fruit. And it's a gleaning project that gleans fruit from throughout the island. And this is fruit that would otherwise be wasted. And it's structured so that the project manager puts together volunteer pickers and people who donate their trees or donate the harvest from their trees. And the fruit is picked and then it's distributed throughout the island. And at our first year was very successful. We were just setting up and it was successful, but quite modest. 100 pounds of fruit were picked and distributed. In the second year, it went up to 400 pounds and that too was distributed. And last year, over 1,500 pounds of fruit that would otherwise have gone to waste were picked on the island, and all of it was distributed and consumed on the island. It wasn't all consumed by people. The first thing that happens when the fruit is picked is that, well, first of all, the volunteer pickers and the people who donate their harvest get to take some of it. Surprisingly, they choose to take very little, so the rest is open to the community. The firsts and seconds are sold at the farmers market, and the very best stuff is donated to the food bank. Small food processors often buy the seconds because they can turn it into jam or into fruit leather. The thirds go to livestock on the island. We donate it to livestock. So as I say, it's not all consumed by people. As well as the gleaning part of the project, we also do training in tree care and which means pruning really. And we run workshops all 3 years. That's a part of the program that we want to expand. But the reason we include that and see that as an important aspect of food resilience on the island, and that's our mission of Bowen Island Food Resilience, is to increase the food security and resilience of the island. But many of the trees on the island are quite neglected. Just because you have an apple tree on your property doesn't mean you know what to do with it, or that you're capable of harvesting it. So the goal of the tree pruning is to increase the skill base on the island, so people can prune their own trees and perhaps help to prune their neighbors' trees as well. And that's been another successful aspect of the project. In coming years, we want to expand that. We want to train a couple of people with quite high skills in tree care and tree pruning so they can offer their services to the community. And we also want to do more educational outreach. And that's our goal as we go through the next 3 years. Now, the funding that we're applying for is through the Prosperity Fund. And it's provincial money that goes to Vancouver Foundation and they funnel it out to local foundations. So the adjudication on the grant will be done locally by our Bowen Island Community Foundation. They require that we have a partner. And to be quite blunt about it, we don't actually really need a partner because you don't need to hold our hands. We've been running this program for 3 years. It's increasingly successful. We welcome a partnership with the municipality, but we are not going to be burdensome for you. As a municipality, the role would be to receive the money, to give us the money, to receive the reports that we write, and we will write as many as you want, either to read or just to file. And that includes the final report and any kind of budget report. So we've included in our budget request to the Prosperity Fund $300 for each of the 3 years for the municipality administration. So that's pretty well it. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. I'll look to council for any questions, comments. Councilor Morse.
Can you just expand a little bit on the distributed then? I mean, used to have an apple tree and I used to use the fruit on it, but first, seconds and best stuff and.
Oh, okay.
And then who gets a chance to go and get it?
Right. The fruit is picked by volunteers.
Yeah.
It's picked from trees that are donated. The fruit is donated. And so it's distributed initially to those people. I mean, they're there, they're on the premises and they take some of the fruit. Now, we structured it initially so it was 1/3 to volunteer pickers, 1/3 to people donating their harvest. But we found in practice, sometimes none of it is taken by those two groups. And I don't think we've ever had a third and a third taken. So the bulk of the fruit that's picked is available for the rest of the community. The first thing that happens is our project manager does really good record keeping. And the first thing that happens after that is that it's divided into 3 categories. The number one's the best quality fruit. Number two, a bit damaged, but still, okay to eat and make jam out of. And the thirds are so damaged that people wouldn't want to eat it. So that's what goes to livestock. The first goes to the farmer's market, or sometimes is sold online, but usually just to the farmer's market, and some portion of that is delivered to the food bank. The seconds also go to the the farmer's market, and it's sold at a lower price, and lower still sometimes go to the people who are doing small food processing on the island. The money from the sales at the farmer's market go to help maintain the project. So for instance, we haven't been able to get money for transportation. So it pays for the gas. And it also allows us to give a cash donation to the food bank.
Okay, it was a bit of a personal question. I was wondering how I managed to get my hands on some of the second.
Do you want the fruit or do you want pickers?
Not pickers, I don't have any trees.
Okay, go to the farmer's market.
Thank you.
Councillor Jurgensen, followed by Councillor Fast.
Really love what you do. Thank you for all your work in the community. I have two questions. One is, what is your overall total budget ask from the Community Prosperity Fund? And second, recognizing that the grants are due today at 5 p.m., is there enough time to get that all together? Between now and then, just trying to find out where you are in the application process.
Good questions. The total ask from the Prosperity Fund over the 3 years is $46,630. And in terms of where we are, I pressed the button and submitted it this morning. And I did that because we were assured by the Vancouver Foundation that if we didn't get a partnership, that we could withdraw the application, but it had to be in by that time.
You're now unmuted.
Understood. Thank you.
Councillor Fast.
Thank you, and thanks for all the good work. Anyway, I'm really appreciative of fruit trees in general, and I know they're having a hard time with climate change. For example, the big snowstorm that we had, I think unpruned trees look to my eye to have suffered worse. We don't have to talk about it here, but I just think my understanding is that fruit follows the knife, and these apple trees are designed to be pruned. That's how they're developed. So I'm just think this is terrific that you're going to work into developing the skills in the community, because sometimes it's really hard to find somebody to help you take care of your fruit trees. And I wish you all the best. That's my 2 bits.
Thank you. No further questions or comments. Thank you so much for being here. Ms. Kevin, thank you for all the work that you do in the community. Appreciate it. Okay, moving us along to the consent agenda. I'll look to council for any items they would like to pull from the consent agenda. Councillor Wake.
12.6 and 12.7.
Okay, Councillor Morse.
I would like to pull 12.10, and I would recommend that we deal with it under correspondence.
Okay. Any other items? Councillor Getty.
12.4.
Seeing no further hands raised, I will look for a motion to adopt the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. The consent agenda, we will, the items that were pulled, we'll deal with in numerical order, starting with 12.4. Which is the item Metro Vancouver regarding A, the board and brief, and B, from Chair George Harvey. Over to you, Councillor Getty.
Okay, so B, the Where Matters report that's attached. I spent some time reading it. I've also forwarded it to the Community Health Foundation. But it's, I just wanted to highlight it for information in terms of really good. It's it's urban centric, but there's some things that can be gleaned from it, and it's really, really good in terms of all the health benefits of more walking and more green spaces, particularly in an urban community, and how it builds community and better mental health and better physical health. So it's a very good report. Not entirely sure how it fits with our strategic planning, but there's little nuggets I think we can pick out. So recommended reading. Otherwise, move to accept it for information.
All right, move to receive by Councillor Getty, seconded by Councillor Fast. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Unanimously. Moving on to 12.6, Don Schaefer regarding climate reality project research sources dated June 6, 2024. Over to you, Councillor Wake.
Thank you, Mayor Leonard. This looks like a really interesting project to me. I do know that it's being referred to the Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee, which is really all we need to do, but I just wanted to highlight it and receive it for information.
Okay. Thank you. So it's been moved to receive, seconded by Councillor Fast. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that carries unanimously. Councillor Wake on 12.10, as you were the first to bring it up, Brad Hawthorne regarding Stunt Cove Sewer System historical data dated June 17th, 2024.
Do we want to save this for later or?
I thought it would be better dealt with under correspondence because there is a request and an asking.
Why don't we do it there?
We could deal with it now.
Okay, I thought this was a very informative letter, and it really helps confirm what I've been hearing from a number of the community who know something about our Snug Cove sewer system. So at a minimum, I think we ought to refer it to the mayor's task force on infrastructure.
I've just as a note, I've proactively reached out after I received this. I reached out to Mr. Hawthorne about possibly presenting either to council or the task force, as he's got sounds like he has a significant amount of underlying data in the way that he's processed it. So I did want to give him the opportunity, should he wish to be able to bring it in front of us, because it does appear that he's done a fair amount of work on it. So I'd be curious to hear what he thinks about that, so I can bring that to a committee of the whole or delegation in front of council or mayor's task force on infrastructure. I'm not sure where he's at with that yet, so he's just looking at the options, but is interested in coming to talk to us. S'mores?
I would at a minimum, I think we need to respond to it, deal with it. And I like the idea of the infrastructure task force and also the idea of Brad Hawthorne coming and presenting. He has quite a detailed PowerPoint presentation already developed. He's working on a large report as well. So it's a lot of, I guess we need to deal with it. So I would move that we refer to the what's there's
Task force.
task force on infrastructure and to staff, and invite Mr. Hawthorne to present as a delegation to a future council meeting or a COW.
Okay. So no, I'm going to take that as a second. Okay, so it's been seconded. Over to you, Councillor Fast.
Thank you. I was wondering if somebody could remind me when it was that Brad Hawthorne was last working for the municipality and in charge of the sewer treatment plant?
It was 2008 or 2009.
Okay.
Seven.
Thank you.
So it's been moved and seconded. I'll just make sure the corporate officer has the.
I do, yeah, I have referred to the mayor's task force on infrastructure and staff and invited him to that delegation. To council with our committee of the whole.
And that I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 And that carries unanimously. Moving back up, we have section 6, business arising from minutes, 6.1, lease of land at 1033 Miller Road, which is lot 3 of the community lands. This was noticed at our last meeting of council with a report by Councillor Lake. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. So I think this is pretty self-explanatory. I have included a report. Slide right now. Okay, well, I guess I'm just wondering if there's any questions on that. This is something that we need to do with the lot 3 project is moving forward.
Councillor Fast, followed by Councillor Morris.
Thank you. I'm wondering, I mean, I appreciate this. Thank you for the work. And following up on the grant funds having been received, and I know you've been involved in this kind of work before, but I didn't see any staff input to this report yet. So Sophie obviously had checked off that she had seen it as corporate officer, but I wonder if, is there a reason that it hasn't been referred to staff first for input, or is there a time rush?
There's not an urgent time rush, but I think staff is well aware of this. I don't know what kind of interaction has happened between Birch and staff, but I thought we would.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to know if there's any timing things. I think it looks good to me. I imagine we'll get staff's input as they prepare the agreement. And I just was wondering whether there were time limits that I didn't know about, or that's my question. Thank you very much. I mean,
I should actually correct that. I did talk to the CAO.
okay.
And perhaps I'll look to staff for comments on this.
Yeah, so Councillor Wake and I have discussed this numerous times, and it is not much of a departure from the previous direction that we've had from council to enter. We do have an agreement to lease the lands, which essentially directs staff to develop a long-term lease at such time when the project was deemed to be viable.
Right.
And I believe that we're at that.
Okay, thank you. That answered my question. I thought there was something already. Okay, good. Thank you very much.
I'm going to keep the order. I'm going to go back to Councillor Morris.
I've got a number of questions about this, and I mean, the very first one just is why there is no staff report, why the chief financial officer has not signed off on this. Why we don't have a copy of the grant award letter. If you look at the news release, it said Bowen Island, in partnership with Lookout. So just what is that involving us with? And the previous agreement with Birch has expired. And I know when we talked about doing that agreement, we were talking about, you know, how much money the lease would be and the size of the land and all that sort of stuff was all discussion. So at this point, I think it's premature to direct staff to enter into something when it's a pig in a poke at this point. We don't know how much the grant was. I think we might know how much the grant was, but we don't know the terms of the grant award. We don't know what the grant application said, and we don't know just what our involvement is and what, if any, commitments we're underlying, and just how the project is to unfold. As far as I know, staff hasn't been involved in any meetings with Lookout. So at this point, I think we should defer and request a staff report.
Move over to you, Councillor Getty.
So it's something other with the previous agreement lease, or this one, has there been, if not, I would ask it to be at least some legal interpretation about the pros and cons of a long-term lease with a group from Vancouver. It's municipal property and a long-term lease with a very well-respected and not criticizing at all Lookout, but I think we need to understand what our position is.
And back to you, Councillor.
In response to Councillor Getty's question, there's another item today about a request for funds to seek legal advice, and that will be part of getting the answer to that question. I've already had a brief conversation with John Lidstone, and he's very familiar with these 60-year leases. That's how most of them are done. And to Councillor Morse's point, I understood that the agreement of lease agreed to reserve the land for 3 years. And so I think it effectively has expired. So I think that's why we need a new one. And in terms of, I don't know what the grant amount is. I'm sure we can find that out. And I think actually, Birch is going to be coming forward. I presumed we would gather this information as staff gets ready to prepare something, but how can we not do this? Do we not want that housing project to move forward? If we wanted to move forward, we need to do this, and we're doing it on the same terms that we did before.
Thank you, Councillor Wake. Over to our CAO, followed by Councillor Moss.
Yeah, I think the previous, or might be multiple previous councils have looked at it pretty extensively in terms of the long-term lease that would be afforded to Birch for the project to advance. And then I do want council to also know that the lease itself would be coming back to council prior to signing. And so this is essentially in the absence of the current agreement to lease being valid. This is essentially seeking council direction to initiate the drafting of that long-term lease.
I guess the more direct question then, is this motion supported by staff?
It is by me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor Morse, followed by Councillor Fast.
The agreement to lease is what is being asked for in this motion. Two other things. I don't understand why there would be a suggestion that it would include a clause indicating that if ownership of the land is transferred, the lease would remain in effect. Most leases that I've ever seen, they don't, unless they put in a specific clause that if the lease is for 60 years, the lease is for 60 years, and future purchaser is bound by that lease. So why we would have a clause in there like that, I don't know. And if we're going to do an agreement to lease, which is seemingly what this report is saying, that BC Housing needs some security to know that we will lease them the land, then we should be seeing the draft agreement to lease before we, or the terms of that agreement for lease before we agree to draft, to have staff prepare it. But it does say prepare an agreement to lease at 30, to look out for consideration by council for July 8th. So, but what are the, when that agreement to lease comes back, I would expect to see all the questions I just raised. But I don't know why staff has not been involved in meetings with Lookout. What are the terms of their grant? And what is that granting agency expecting from the municipality other than the lease of the land? And the other thing is, my understanding, if we sign an agreement to lease, then we've got to do the notification now as part of that, not when the lease is signed. Just, so I wouldn't approve any of the whereas in here other than the first one.
Okay. Councillor Fast.
As a counselor who's been around this table for a while, this is a project that's ongoing. I just see this as the next cycle, only this time funding has been approved. I would like to act on that. And there's been so much work go into it. I imagine that a draft agreement would come back to council with a staff report accompanying it. And that's the way all the other ones come back. So I'm in support of the motion, and if the councillor wishes to make it, maybe just the first bit and the last bit until we know more.
Councillor Saunders.
Just listening to the discussion and having read the report earlier, I think the questions that Councillor Morse raised are really valid, but I also think they can be addressed in the course of, like this motion isn't asking us to approve anything other than generate a lease that would then have to come back here in any event. So I think if we were to see that with a staff report, indicating support for it or otherwise, and where those questions do get answered, it seems to me this, maybe we're just expediting more than anything else by moving ahead now. So I'd be in favor of that.
I'm gonna go Councillor Fast, Councillor Morrison. I'd like to get a motion on the table.
I was just going to suggest to the mover that he insert the word, consider putting the word draft in front of the word agreement to help everybody be really clear.
I was going to suggest a couple of things. One, that we delete the third whereas and the second whereas, and that the resolution say that council requests staff to provide a report to accompany a draft agreement to lease.
Give Councillor Wake a moment to catch up as it's his motion, and whenever you're ready, you feel free to read out what you've got.
Can I respond to some of the concerns?
Or get the motion, and then you can speak to the motion.
Okay.
Whatever you want to say.
Well, I'm going to put it in as it's written here. With the addition of the word draft. Whereas BC Housing funding has now been approved for the 24-unit Birch project at 1033 Mellon Road. And BC Housing requires Lookout to have land tenure for the site in order to proceed with the funding and development process. And a long-term lease from BIM to Lookout would provide the required land tenure. An agreement to lease would provide a draft agreement to lease would provide initial assurance to Lookout and BC Housing. This could be followed up with a long-term lease later in 2024 and include a clause indicating that if ownership of the land is transferred, the lease would remain in effect. Therefore, be it resolved that council directs staff to prepare a draft agreement to lease the lands at 1033 Miller Road to Lookout Housing and Health Society for consideration by council. And I'll just put at a future meeting rather than.
Moved by Councillor Wake, seconded by Councillor Fast. And to the motion, Councillor.
So the reason for the okay, why am I not seeing the part that you need on?
And include a clause, it's third, halfway along the third line of last whereas. I'm reading your staff report, I'm reading the report on the council again.
Okay. I don't. Sure why, but I don't see that on the one for the agenda. Oh, okay, I'm sorry, thank you. So the reason for that is that we are in the process of considering creating a housing organization, a community-owned housing organization. We've been at this for a little while. And Birch has had a significant involvement in getting this project. We wouldn't have been successful with this if Birch had not started it and carried it through, partnered with Lookout. And I know Councillor Morris has suggested that we can just get all kinds of other nonprofit organizations to come here and do the projects. I don't think that's the case. We need to have somebody on island. I've said it many times before. We need to have somebody on island, a professional staff who wake up every morning thinking, how can we actually move forward resolving this housing problem? And it's problem is huge. So it is conceivable. I'm not suggesting it, but I just want to leave the opportunity open that at some point, look out, or the municipality will transfer the lease to Birch, and Birch will enter into a similar lease. And if that's the case, we just want to reassure Lookout that the lease may be moving around here, but it's going to stay in effect.
Councillor Fast, followed by Councillor Morris.
I'm in support of this motion and thank you for bringing it forward. I'm think that having just come from Trust Council and seeing the housing issues on other islands, some are worse than Bowen's situation. Some have made more progress than Bowen. And so I think this is really important to get this moving as through a motion like this, to get staff involvement and to act on the BC housing funding is significant. So I'll be voting for this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
I would like to move an amendment to the resolution.
Mhm.
Two of them actually, but I'll do the first one first. To insert the words, after directing staff to draft an agreement to lease for consideration, and after society, including a staff report for consideration by council at a future meeting.
So a motion to insert the words, including a staff report after the Housing and Health Society.
Yeah.
Amendment been moved. Is there a seconder?
Oh, okay, sorry.
Unfortunately, you can't second motions from the gallery. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seeing none, that amendment is not on the floor. So your second amendment, Councillor Morris?
I'm totally in favor of Lookout building this project, but we don't have information. At this point, to me, it's a pig in a poke.
Sorry, what?
A pig in a poke.
Okay.
Scottish saying from my grandmother. And I have no support for the clause that said this could be followed, include a clause indicating if ownership of the land is transferred, the lease would remain in effect, especially given the reasons that Councillor Wake has given for why he would want the land transfer. And as I said earlier, most leases do not end when the land's transferred unless there's a specific clause put in the lease to that respect. So I'm sorry, much as I love the project and I want to see it go ahead, my professional background just doesn't let me be in favor of this at this point, the way it's worded.
Thank you. I will look for any other first-time speakers. Seeing none, Councillor Fast.
Just noting that in the 1, 2, 3, 4th clause, it does say this could be followed with a long-term lease. It's only a suggestion, it's not a directive, and so I'm in favor.
I wasn't complaining about the long-term lease part of the clause, it's the next part.
It all has the word could in front of it.
Okay. See no further discussion or debate. I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, raise your hand, say nay.
And I would like
I,
my, just to have a very brief comment in minutes that I'm objecting to the resolution on the lack of information, not because I don't want to see a housing project.
So, sorry, so the motion, just for everybody, I mentioned the motion, is carried, Councillor Morse in opposition. And, any last comment here, Councillor Morse or Councillor Fast?
Yes, just to point out that that council adopted years ago a resolutions only minutes approach, and that councillors asked them for their individual comments to be added to the record. Sometimes means at the next council meeting, they get adjusted. I would just like to stick with our resolutions only form of minute taking just for across the board.
Right, and just a clarification from, in my view, Chair, the record of the meeting is the recording, which is available at any and all times, and then the minutes themselves are still action oriented. Okay, moving on to section 7 bylaws, 7.1 introduction to application for rezoning of 2095 Cape Drive, which does not include camping. We have Drew back in. I am planner here.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This report is to introduce a land use bylaw amendment application for 2095 Cape Drive in order to permit the continued operations of a school without need of a temporary use permit. The property has a single building used as a school by the Island Discovery Learning Community, IDLC, which is currently permitted to operate under a temporary use permit. So that TUP was approved in November 2020 for a 3-year term, extended in June 2023, and will expire in 2026. So due to the limitations on reapprovals of temporary use permits under provincial legislation, that TUP cannot be renewed a second time. So this application seeks to permanently allow the school use through a land use bylaw amendment. The building on site was constructed in 2020. It's a 2-story single-family dwelling used as a school. The property has on-site water and septic, along with plenty of space for off-street parking. The maximum occupant load for the building is 30 people. Classes run on weekdays from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Typically 20 students in the building at a time, plus 3 staff. Most families have carpooling, and that reduces the number of cars set to come to the property by about 7 cars per day. There's a public transit bus stop available at Reef Road and White Sails. From there, children walk down DC Road to school. It's noted sometimes the bus drops off the children at the end of White Sails Drive, time permitting. There were also 2 building code requirements that were noted at construction that would have to be addressed upon making the school a permanent use. So one of those requirements has been addressed. So it's concerning a paved parking space. And then the other issue concerning a ground floor washroom being made accessible is currently being addressed by the applicant. Staff notes that the official community plan does support rezonings to allow schools within rural and village areas. However, neither the rural nor institutional designations themselves actually allow this crossover. So it'd therefore be appropriate for staff to draft an OCP amendment for a new rural/institutional designation that would apply to 2095 Cape Drive only. And that would allow rezoning without conflicting with the OCP. Likewise, there's a OCP section concerning Cape Audrey Curtis area that should be amended to note educational institutions. So staff recommend the council refers the application to the Advisory Planning Commission and directs staff to prepare a bylaw to return for first reading. And just a note that since an OCP amendment is included in that process, public hearing will be required. Thank you.
Thank you. I will look to council for questions of planner. Councilman.
Sorry, why can't we just do a simple zone variation?
That's what we're putting forward.
Oh, okay. And we have to amend the OCP in order to do that?
Yeah, in this case, just because those sections of the OCP don't directly allow.
And will the zone variation be specific, that it's only as long as the school is occupying that property? So that.
I mean, yeah, typical zone variation would be permanent.
Because Andrew said in the delegation. Right, his public comment.
I think what he was referring to, they didn't want a rezoning that would change us to only school designation and disallow home moving forward. So they've kind of asked it specifically in this case so that it can be just a residence moving forward or school.
Seeing no further question, or Counselor Fast?
I was gonna move the motion.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I move that council refer application RZ 2024-0073 to the Advisory Planning Commission, and that council direct staff to prepare a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw to allow for the development proposal presented by Alan Sogstad, outlined in the June 2024 council meeting. Want to add the word council? Thank you.
Seconded by Counselor Wake. Any further discussion? Counselor Giddy.
I'm really glad that this has all worked out. I was part of the community that was spoke against the relocation at Evergreen Hall. And all this is much farther away. I think this has worked out to be a really, really good solution for them. I'm glad that IDLC has found a place that sounds like it could become permanent for them, and that they're getting all the support that they need and deserve from the community and the participants. And I think that if we can support IDLC that with this, that's good for us as well.
Thank you. Counselor Fast.
I was trying to add up all the schools and educational. I think this is one of the features of Bowen Island is that we have a lot of education happening, including Montessori over the years and CNIB when it was operating as in its full capacity, and the number of other schools and sometimes we had a Bowen Island lifelong learning society as well at one point. So that, it's a feature of our community, and I hope this motion passes.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 You're now unmuted.
And that carries unanimously. Thank you.
Unmute video.
It's the main event now. It has passed.
You just need to do this on counting.
Moving on to 7.2 Fire and Rescue Services Bylaw number 650, fees and charges, bylaw number 651, and bylaw notice enforcement amendment bylaw. Well, we're bylaw in one agenda item number 654. We have our fire chief Hannon here. Present or just to ask questions?
Yeah, I don't have anything to present today, but if there is any questions for us.
Absolutely. So I will look to council for any questions of our fire chief. Councilor Getty.
So I noticed a lot of our comments from the last go through with you have been adopted, but 3.12 is still there in terms of the cost of demolition going back to the owner of the property. So has that been discussed with legal counsel or compared to other jurisdictions?
Yes, and that's more in, this would be concerning a situation where there's an immediate need to take something down.
Yeah.
More of an absentee property owner. So we can't get a hold of them. There's nothing we can do. We need to take it down, and we just go ahead and do that.
Well, that's the 3.11. So the 3.12 is once that happens, no, I think it might be 3.10 is that you can take it down under whatever circumstances you think require it. And 3.11 is that you're not required to compensate for any of that demolition. But then 3.12 says that the homeowner pays for the cost on an hourly rate of the people that do the demolition. So I think we need to highlight that so that people make sure, if it is intended to be included, that people make sure that that's part of their insurance coverage.
Okay.
Or that they have some other arrangements, or we don't include it. So I think that's.
Yeah, no, this is the same. yeah, the same wording as our neighboring communities in their bylaws.
All right, and then with respect to Schedule A, 7.5, not sure if I can pull this up, but, there's a list of costs. So the minimum charge is $827, and then if it's a structure, it's $595, and a motor vehicle, $140. This is for fire investigation services. So are those added? There's a minimum plus the $140 for a motor vehicle plus $595 if it's a structure, or are they different amounts?
Those would be different amounts if depending on what's involved, what needs to be.
Okay, so how does the minimum come in then?
Can you say the number again?
7.5 under Schedule A.
Thank you.
I would have to read.
Okay. I would highlight that for you then. Okay, and with respect to the bylaw enforcement schedule, there's a compliance, which is has a separate amount or slightly up to 50% of the so with respect to 3.8 and 6.1 sub D, 3.8 is failure to secure a vacant or damaged building. And 6.1 sub D is fail to maintain access routes. And there may be, I'm thinking there may be situations where people make their best efforts and somehow or other somebody else intervenes or something falls over that in the process. And that in those situations where they've made their best efforts, there's no real negligence involved, that they might be then open to a compliance agreement if there's some situations. So is that possible to have a yes in that column as at least considered available?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Which one were you at again?
Bylaw enforcement schedule, AO,
Yeah,
and it's the far right
Which number?
column, compliance agreement. 3.8, failure to secure a vacant or damaged building, and 6.1 sub D, fail to maintain an access route. All the others, I think, there's fairly strict language.
Wait, just give me a bearings. You had their hands up. Councilor Morris followed by Councilor Fest.
I had one wording change on bylaw 654 under 5.3C, where it talks about unsafe disposal of smoking equipment, cigarettes, et cetera, aren't equipment. So I would suggest that wording be unsafe disposal of smoking items and equipment. So insert the words items and after smoking.
Well, that's in the,
I'm in bylaw 654.
yeah, what item is that?
5.3C for Charlie.
And then the proposed fix for that was,
Insert the words items and after smoking. So it would read unsafe disposal of smoking items and equipment. I hate finding cigarette butts lying around that have the gray ash on the end, which you know have been thrown out while still burning.
right,
So easy to have a cup full of water or something in your car. Plop it in that.
Which page is that on?
I don't know what page it is because
Thank you.
I use agenda notes.
And over to you, Councillor Fast.
Thank you. I'm 16. Okay, I've been supporting of this. I'm looking at my notes from the last time it was in front of us, and it looked like those were picked up. I think we need to be thinking about wildfire safety and education, and have the firefighters and first responders have some tools to deal with disposing of cigarettes and more tools than they have now. And I'm prepared to move the motion.
Okay, I think there's going to be a series of amendments that we propose just based on what Councillor Getty and Councillor Morse have said. So Councillor Getty, your amendments to the schedule in 654 is in relation to 6.1D, and which was the other item?
3.8.
3.8. And that was just to amend the no compliance agreement available to a yes on both of those items. And I'll just let the corporate officer come to
Yeah, so 6.1D and 3.8 both be amended to no compliance. Available from 10:01.
okay, so is there a seconder for that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Fast. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. And that carries unanimously. And then to Councillor Morse's amendment, 5.3C, inserting the word items after smoking in 5.3C. Is that correct?
Items and.
Items and.
Items and equipment.
So it reads items and equipment.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry,
yep,
vaporizing, so it'll read vaporizing items and equipment?
No, if you read 5.3C, it talks about throwing out cigarettes, burning cigars and all that stuff. And vaping equipment and so
So where would your amendment go?
after smoking, because it's not just
Smoking items and equipment
equipment.
or vaporizing equipment?
Well, no, vaporizing is equipment.
Smoking items.
But the items is put there to pick up cigarettes and cigars and that
Got
kind
it.
of stuff.
Okay, thank you.
okay, moved by Councillor Morse. Seconded by Councillor Getty. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye.
So I hate to do this, but looking at the changes that Councillor Getty asked for in 6.1D,
Mhm.
I'm not sure why that wouldn't apply to 6.1A. Failure to keep access routes so clear. 6.1B, failure to post a fire lane sign. You might have posted it and somebody might have posted it down. So I guess at this point, I'm not gonna make a bunch of suggestions, but we might want to have a relook at the no's and yeses. Which will be easy to change down the road. I think we need to get this going. And it's, most of it is also in the section 6 are things that don't really apply to us because we don't have big, industrial parks and apartment complex, where there's all sorts of different things. So I don't think most of that will apply.
Yes.
Oh, I was just gonna ask what Councillor Getty was doing.
Yeah, what's happening right now?
I was just putting up the other amendment.
Okay. Okay, we've got those amendments. Is there another amendment that you wish to make, Councillor Getty?
No, I was asking a question about the charges Schedule A for fire and rescue services bylaw about the minimum and then a list of other fees. It's a little bit confusing. I'll leave it for now.
Okay. Right. And I will track that our fire chief can bring back amendments as needed as this unfolds. With that, I'll look for a Text has been amended, so I'll look for the recommendation to be moved, please. Councillor Fast.
I move that bylaw number 650/2024, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Fire and Rescue Services bylaw number 650/2024 be read as amended a second and third time. And that bylaw number 651/2024, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Fees and Charges bylaw 651/2024 be read a first, second, and third time. That bylaw 654, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Bylaw Notice Enforcement Bylaw number 196/2008, amendment bylaw number 654/2024 be read a first, second, and third time.
Moved by Councillor Fast, seconded by Councillor Wake. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that carries unanimously. Thank you so much, Stephen. 7.3 bylaws, bylaw numbers 655, 656, and 657. Development and building fee review. We have our manager of planning and development, Daniel Martin, joining us here today. And just here for questions, Mr. Martin, or is there a presentation as well?
I can speak for questions.
Sure. Great. So I will look to council for any questions or comments to the planner. Seeing none, I'll look for council to put the recommendation on the floor, please. Councilor Wick?
Council recommends that bylaw resolves that bylaw number 655/2024, cited as Bowen Island Municipality.
Just one Bowen Island.
Just one Bowen Island,
Yeah,
there,
sufficient.
Bowen Island Municipality Building Numbering Regulatory Bylaw number 25, 2000, Amendment Bylaw number 655/2024 be read a first, second, and third time. And that bylaw number 656/2024, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Development Application Fees Bylaw 484, 2019 Amendment Bylaw number 656/2024 be read a first, second, and third time. And that bylaw number 656/2024.
657. It's a typo.
Cited as Bowen Island Municipality Building Bylaw number 489, 2019, Amendment Bylaw number 657/2024 be read a first, second, and third time.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Wake, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any discussion on these items? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
And that carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Martin. 7.4 bylaws number 658, 659, and 650 or 660 bylaw amendments for short-term rentals. We have our manager of planning and development joining us here again. Any comments on these pieces or just here for questions?
Again, I can just be here for questions.
Okay. Councilor Morse?
I have a lot of questions. And I'm not sure whether, since we are having a committee of the whole on the 15th of July, if it wouldn't be better to be dealt with at the committee of the whole on July 15th. One of my major questions is, you know, we're combining B&Bs and short-term rentals or residential guest accommodation, all under the definition of short-term rental. And yet the province's legislation doesn't deal with B&Bs. So I'm by not sort of paralleling the provincial legislation, are we creating confusion? And the other is, we still haven't had an answer from the province. The definition of what the province is calling it doesn't match the definition of property host and short-term rental accommodation, supplier host and short-term offer. All those provincial definitions pick up the cottages in the code, what we are calling commercial guest accommodation. And we haven't had an answer from the province as to whether or not they're going to fix the legislation. And so I think, being that this isn't time sensitive, because none of this comes into effect until November 1st, that we should maybe try and get an answer from the province and also to And then the other is, just I have a whole bunch of, why can't somebody who comes and uses their property in the summer for 3 months, run a B&B out of that for the same 3 months or occasionally. They're not offering it a short-term rental accommodation, they're a residential guest, they're just, so I have more questions and discussion, I think, that is appropriate for a council meeting. So I would like to move that we defer discussion of this item to the July 15th.
So a postponement has been moved by Councillor Morris. Is there a seconder for that?
Chris.
So second?
Seconded by Councillor Jurgensen. Any discussion just on postponement? Councillor Fast.
I won't be here.
Okay.
I prefer to discuss it today.
Let's see, no further comments or debate on postponement. I will call the question on postponement to the July 15th Committee of the Whole. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, raise your hand and say nay.
Nay.
That carries with Councillor Fast opposing. Thank you, Mr. Martin. And moving on to 7.5, bylaw number 63, provincial bill 44, upcoming changes to provincial legislation. We have our Island Community Planner. Just our planners playing hot potatoes in the potential seat right now. Over to you, Mr. Vacuum.
Mayor and Council, the purpose of this report is to return to Council with results of the referral, the Island referral to the Islands Trust Executive Council, and to present the amending bylaw for second and third reading. So the Executive Committee of the Islands Trust met on June 5th, 2024 to consider the request for decision regarding bylaw number 653. The Executive Committee resolved that the Executive Committee advised Bowen Island Municipality that bylaw number 653 is not contrary to or at variance with the Islands Trust policy statement. Under the provisions of Bill 44, just to note that the municipality is prohibited from sending this bylaw to a public hearing. Bill 44 requires that changes to permit secondary suites be adopted by June 30th. The current schedule will see staff present the bylaw for adoption at the following regular council meeting scheduled for July 8th, 2024. It's just a week past the deadline. Staff will continue to update provincial staff with the anticipated adoption date for bylaw 653. Should provincial staff insist on adoption prior to June 30th, staff may propose the holding of a special council meeting to consider adoption of bylaw 653. So staff's recommendation is that bylaw 653 be put by council a second and third time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mackin. I'll look for questions or comments to staff and council. Councillor Morse.
I'm just confirming there's no amendments to the bylaw. It was a typo where you said amended bylaw. It's
Right.
amending bylaw.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it's amending.
Yeah.
No changes since last.
Happy to move the motion.
Okay, I saw Councillor Getty with her hand up, so the speakers was first. Councillor Getty.
So the staff report on page 3 of 9, the very heading is amendment bylaw 653/2024 permits accessory residential use in any residential zones. That's the Bill 44 requirement. Also includes an amendment to increase the maximum size of a secondary suite, adopting a similar maximum size calculation as applied to detached secondary suites. So that second sentence is a little bit confusing to me. So the increased maximum size of secondary suites is available in parts of Bowen, but this is suggesting that it's all part.
Sorry, can you say that again?
I'm not sure what that second sentence means in that. Why it's in addition to Bill 44, the requirements of that, then what you're suggesting in the staff report is to include an amendment to increase the maximum size of secondary suite, adopting something that's similar to detached secondary suites. So what is that about?
So currently that wasn't required under Bill 44. So at previous council meetings, we brought up that we could address that at this time. And so that was part of what was referred to the Advisory Planning Commission and the Housing Advisory Committee, was whether or not we should consider at this time, so since we're in the and the conversation of discussing increasing housing options on Bowen is discussed whether we could increase the attached secondary suite size to be in line with the size of the detached size. So they all agreed on that. So we included that amendment with this.
All right, and what's the effect of that?
So it'll allow a larger size. So currently the absolute maximum size you could do of a attached secondary suite was 90 square meters, whereas detached secondary suite under the current regulations was up to 140 square meters. So we're now getting rid of that 90 square meter limit, and it's that same 140 maximum. So whether it's attached or detached, it's allowed to go to
140? 140?
Yeah, so that was the maximum if you go to is scaled based on the size of the lot.
Councillor Fast.
Thank you. This is the question I had as well, and I looked up the size of my house. Our house, family house is 140 square meters, right? Really sounds so weird to me.
1,400 square feet.
Yeah, 14.
1,300 square feet, 140 square meters, yeah. So anyway, this makes sense to me. It means that the space could be used by a small family or a mixed group like we've got at my home right now with my dad living with us. So it gets a little bit more flexibility, but I think that, and can you confirm, Planner back on the larger size, 140 square meters only comes if there's a big enough lot. So because there's a calculation that takes you up to that, could you explain that?
Yeah, it's permitted, what is it, 0.0625% of lot size, something like that. It's,
Yeah.
I don't have it right in front of me,
Okay.
but yeah, so it's scaled to the lot size. So
Thank you. So most places would just have the 90 square meters, but it's only on a larger lot that they could move up to 140 square meters.
yeah, I think I looked at it before. I think 1 acre lot, I think that's the turning point. I think at a 1 acre lot, you'd still be at that maximum 90 square meters. You have to be larger than 1 acre to go to that larger size.
Okay, thank you.
Back to you, Councillor Morris, for any comments. On the
I
motion.
just wanted to point out for an attached secondary suite, which I think is what this is covering. If you've got a 2-floor or a 3-floor house, like if your house was 3,000 square feet, then your lower floor could be entirely pretty well an attached secondary suite, which, you know, if the location's right and the topography's right, you've got 2 ground floor entry residential units that are adequate for 2 families. Yeah.
Chief for the motion, Councillor Morris.
Oh, okay. That bylaw number 653 cited as Bowen Island Municipality Land Use Bylaw number 557, 2002. Amendment bylaw number 653, 2024 be read a second and third time.
Moved by Councillor Morris, seconded by Councillor Saunders. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand. Aye. And that carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Batkin. Staff reports 8.1 Bowen Island Food Resilience Society request for partnership. We have our manager in Parks, Environment and Parks Planning, Carlos Feliz, with us here today. Okay. So any comments on this item or just here for questions?
No, thank you. Just here for questions.
Okay. Any questions or comments to staff from council on this item? Councilor
I
Morris?
think somebody asked about the amount of the grant, and I think the staff report talks about them applying for 20,000. So I think that question was covered up in the staff report.
Councilor Fast with the motion?
I move that council support Bowen Island Food Resilience Society's application to the Bowen Island Community Foundation's Prosperity Grant for their low-hanging fruit project by providing overall grant management required to receive the funding.
Moved by Councilor Fast, seconded by Councilor Getty. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that carries unanimously. Thank you. 8.2, our 2023 Statement of Financial Information. We have our CFO.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the mayor to the rest of council. This is the last of our statutory annual financial reports. It is a report that's filed by the, filed with the province. It is a report that provides some insight into how we spend our money each year. It includes information about salary and remuneration to staff and council, as well as any payments over 25,000 to vendors or suppliers. Happy to receive questions about the report.
Councilor Saunders.
The only thing, thank you. The only thing that jumped out at me in your statement of operations, the contribution to tangible assets of 5 million, what was that?
That, for the most part, that is the land around Grafton Lake, which was finally approved through the subdivision, which was great.
Okay, thank
It
you.
became municipal land. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, I will look for motion to approve the 2023 statement of financial information. Moved by Councilor Getty, seconded by Councilor Saunders. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Thank you. And moving on to 8.3, CAO update from Mr. Edwards here.
Thank you, Mayor. So I want to give you a bit of an update on the community center project. While the roof is still being worked on, and I asked for estimated completion date today, but they couldn't provide one. But I do know that they are adding more staff to that roofing element of the project, and so I'm hopeful that that roof will get completed in the next, well, I hesitate to say a date. But I'm told by the builder that the project completion date is still targeting the end of July. And we are, and they seem to be holding to that. And so that is fast approaching. And we are deep in the planning for the move from this hall to the new hall. And if the commissioning and the occupancy date holds for the project, then we would be moving from here to there at the last weekend of July. And we've got a lot of things in motion to make that happen. And so as the plan, as I've described it before, we would be in the hall for at least a couple of weeks before we would open it to any kind of public opening. Make sure that everything is operating in the way that it should be and for us to settle in there. And so with any luck, and don't hold me firm to this, we would be opening in the middle of August. And then really starting to program the space soon thereafter. And we would be planning for a longer celebration week, probably in October. And so it's pretty exciting. There is a ton of work to be done on the outside of the building. Inside, it is a hive of activity, and it looks really good in there. And so right now on the outside of the building, we're seeing a lot of remaining civil work being completed. The septic system is going in as we speak. Of course, we encountered more rock than anticipated, which happens often on Bowen. And so we may end up having to do some blasting because they've been rock chipping hard for the last few days. And but it's now slowing down as the rock gets harder as they get deeper into the rock. So next, soon to follow will be asphalt paving, and then we'll see some of the hardscape landscaping going in. The softscape landscaping we've asked to be postponed until later in the fall when the rains start. So it's pretty exciting, and it is it's achievable. So we're hopeful that. And we're still waiting on the outcome of the tender process for the West Side Blue Water drinking water project to see how that project will unfold. And we're still on pause for the Eagle Cliff expansion project until we get the packaged treatment plant back from the Purifix manufacturer in Ontario. And the same thing for the multi-use path. We're in discussions with funders about the next stage of that project, which would take us from Artisan Square to Charles Lane. And that's it for my capital project update.
Okay. Any questions or comments from council? Councilor Morse.
The Blue Water tender closing date is,
It was the Friday.
okay, so we'll have some answers then before we have the July 11th Blue Water information meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to new business, 11.1 or 2023 annual municipal report. Back over to you, Mr. Jones.
So I don't have a presentation for council. But the report has been up on our site for at least, I believe it's a couple of weeks now, for review, and is being presented here today for council approval.
Any questions for staff on the annual report? Councilor Fast.
Just a comment that for staff, that every year the annual report, which can sometimes be a really dry read, is now an interesting read. And so thanks to all involved in making it inclusive and inviting and answering people's questions. Like I'm looking at page 24 where it says, if you have questions like these, you're probably going to be talking to somebody in environment and parks planning. Because a lot of times people don't know what kind of questions can I even ask. So I like that it asks example questions. And I think that's more useful to people. I just invite everybody to have a look at it. It answers all kinds of questions and it has the audited financial statements. Thank you.
I trust you found the audited financial statements the most interesting part. I couldn't resist.
I'd like to move that council approve the 2023 annual municipal report.
By Councilor Fast, seconded by Councilor Saunders. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that carries unanimously. Moving on to 11.2, 11.3. Metro Vancouver, the only piece that's happened at Metro Vancouver in the last 2 weeks that I've been a part of has been a regional parks tour, which happened on Friday during an absolute sweltering day. We spent the whole day in and around Burns Bog, which was a fascinating little tour to see what they do both from an ecosystem management perspective, as well as their partnership with Delta for the maintenance of certain parts of the bog area. And then also we got a presentation from their fire department on how they're managing wildfires, preparing for wildfires in the bog, given that it has burned in places several times over the last couple of decades. So it was a fascinating and really interesting tour to be a part of for the day there. Upcoming at Metro this Friday is the Metro Vancouver board meeting. The big ticket item happening at that meeting will be the election of a new chair on the 28th. And then TransLink has meetings coming up this week. The public portion of the meeting, there's some interesting pieces on that one. TransLink is presenting a final version of a report of an efficiencies review that was conducted on TransLink as an organization. As well, they will also be presenting a proposed approach to the 2025 investment plan, the big investment plan that's coming up. Happy to take any questions.
We all got I got an email this morning, I think everybody did, inviting us for tours of various operational areas. So,
Oh, for TransLink, yeah. Yep.
which, last time I did that, it was very interesting to see, especially the repair yard and what they have to do overnight to clean those trains.
Yeah. So for council members that want to see some of the larger operational center of TransLink. I'd highly recommend those tours, and the TransLink staff are very friendly and accommodating as well. Councilor Wake?
And as far as the planning for 2025 and the big capital plan, is that contingent on further approval of funding? Or is it geared towards how much funding they already have?
I would be, I'm equally curious to hear what the 2025 proposed approach includes. My own humble reading of the tea leaves would say that there's probably pieces that are to come, especially given the nature of a provincial election that's happening in the fall. So yeah, there's no news on the funding. Depends on what shakes out, and if no funding does come forward, then TransLink will be looking at major service cuts to deal with their structural deficit. Councilor Morse?
Just remembering back, is there any recommendations for questions that we should be asking candidates coming up? I know TransLink did a fair sort of pre-election questions for candidates type of things the last time around. We had federal and provincial elections. So is that same information going to be out there so that we have questions to ask our various candidates?
That's a great question. I can bring it back. I know that TransLink is working very hard on a public relations strategy that will
For the election.
carry through the election, and that will be passed on to the mayor's council as the kind of elected representatives and having the more direct interface with their provincial counterparts. I would expect to see that.
You don't want to vote for somebody who says no more funding.
Right. Or we do want to vote for someone that said, we're gonna give you more funding for the Bowen Island Ferry. And with that, I will pass it on to our islands trustees for an update on islands trust business.
Sure, thank you. We're back from Trust Council was held on Salt Spring Island. And I'll just read you through my features list here. Adam Olson spoke, MLA Olson from Spanish North and the Gulf Islands. Very interesting advice for Islands Trust Council in terms of perhaps approaching the province for a review. It was the 50th anniversary of the Islands Trust, so we all received one of these little booklets, and I brought one for the mayor if you pass that one down.
Thank you.
And the last little part of it brings you kind of up to date with the trust policy statement and things like that. There's an earlier version as well, which I can get you if you like. We said farewell to Russ Hoxenfeller, CAO. This was his last trust council. He's around for a couple more weeks. Strategic planning tables. We had a Wednesday full day strategic planning session ending up with dots on pages all over the wall. And anyway, we'll see. People seem to be putting some of their dots. Anyway, books. Judy brought everybody on Trust Council one of these books. Thank you very much, Judy. I already have my own copy at home, so you're welcome to pass it along to somebody that needs it. But these are Elimina books, and they are fantastic. You can look up any problem in there, or I really like the well, whatever. You can find lots of different ways to find the answers or some options for getting around sticky situations. Thank you, Judy. And the Transport Canada, some of you were asking who was that speaker. He was speaking specifically to the Wrecked and Abandoned Vessels Act. So that was the very last thing in the agenda. I had to leave partway through the questions and answers, but it looked like it'd be really good. So as soon as it's up on the recording, you might want to have a look at that, because it's been, that act has been in place for 5 years. They're in a review period. And we're speaking more about the Southern Gulf Islands, but also in terms of how it could be used, the limits of what Coast Guard and Transport Canada could do under the Act. And we had 3 First Nations welcomes. That's a first. One of them was from our own First Nations intergovernmental advisor, Joe Elliott, and he is from that area, so he gave us a formal welcome. And then family, a representative of a family from Salt Spring who has never, their family has never not lived on Salt Spring, but not affiliated with the nation, came in and welcomed us and had a few words to say. And then later on in the meeting, another gentleman came from Penelakut, an elected council member, also saying hello and giving made a few comments. And he was, his main comment that stuck with me was, we're still living off the land. So excuse me, I got to go back to cutting up fish. And so that it was useful. And our next one, I believe, is in Nanaimo in September. But anyway, over to Chair of our Governance Committee on Trust Council.
One of the things that we published after a fairly lengthy in-camera meeting back in, I think it was March, was, or it might have been earlier, a discussion that we'd had about the Section 3 of the Islands Trust Act, our mandate. And that has generated quite a significant amount of letters to the editor and letters to council. And with respect to how disappointed people are that we have defined special amenities in a way that they don't agree with. So there's, we discussed at the meeting how we think that there's some pretty fundamental misunderstandings in terms of what the in-camera session is about. And there's some problems with respect to reporting. And some things that had to be changed. So the whole thing has turned into quite a mess, and we're going to have to go back and rethink both an explanation of the content of the meeting and how it was reported out, and how to deal with misinformation or misunderstanding when it gets picked up and it just becomes viral. So that was, being the chair of the governance committee, my mother would be so proud. I've been mentioned by name in several letters to the editor, but you know, it's one of those things where it's not necessarily a popularity contest, but it's really, really hard to respond when it's a council decision. So it's a bit of a conundrum, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned, but it's one of those things that's a little bit difficult to be able to analyze and to take apart. There's some reactions from some people that are I mean, the reason why I bought everybody a copy of the book was because we have to figure out some ways of having better discussions. And I mentioned that it was working so well on Bowen, and that we should, you know, help us get there. So this morning's meeting from the governance committee was about the code of conduct, and I had put a cat amongst the pigeons and suggested that we needed to toughen up a lot of the enforcement proceedings. And the meeting this morning went much, much better than I expected, but there's still a lot of concern about just what exactly did I have in mind, other than generating a discussion in terms of penalties for people. So we have resolved to form another committee. See how that goes.
Well played.
We had a delegation from BC Hydro that was very interesting in terms of how they supply power to all of the Gulf Islands, and the different things that they're doing to upgrade that. We had a delegation from Subig Oil, and that has generated a great deal of conversation amongst the trustees. A delegation from Clear and Safe Harbors, and there's some unbelievably crazy things going on with all the liveaboards on boats in around Salt Spring Harbor. And then the reactions in terms of the Section 3. We also had discussions at the end of the agenda, one of which was dark sky principles in terms of keeping lights low and down and directed, and that's going to be coming to us eventually. And this discussion presentation from Transport Canada. It's the Clean and Safe Harbors. It's this whole thing in terms of a divided jurisdiction between Transport Canada and Coast Guard. And there's so many ways that they don't overlap and they don't coincide, and it's presenting real problems, so. It's interesting. I was exhausted and wanted to get home, but it's still very interesting. There's some excellent people on the press council. One of which is Joe Elliott.
Bernardo?
No.
Joe Elliott is the
It's the staff.
Staff person
Yeah.
who's going to be
First Nation,
speaking to
yes.
our OCP steering committee.
Yes.
And I met him for the first time and he's very interesting. So I think he's gonna be a really good resource for us and the trust.
Joe will be presenting tomorrow to the steering committee, so anybody that might be interested. The package of reference material that he sent out was about this thick. Yeah, so 3 of the reports were manageable size. The 4th one was humongous. I had a question on your comment about a report back in March about interpretation of section 3 of the ITA. Did we get a copy of that interpretation? Was it a public document?
Not sure, I think so.
So I just go back and look at the March council agenda?
It's a monster to find. That's part of the problem. I'll get it for you.
Okay, thanks.
That's right.
On the presentation from Adam Olson on governance, how did that relate to governance work here? Was it something different or?
He spoke, one of the things that the previous council had done, just before the end of their term was to put forward a motion to ask the province. I think there were 6 points that they wanted to, 6 bullet points that we wanted to raise. And at the beginning of the very first meeting in our term, we got a reply back from the minister saying that, thank you very much. They were not going to be, helping us with answers to those questions, and we should deal with our problems internally. So 20 months have passed, and we've been playing with that, with trying to figure out what the difference is between internal and external, and coming to grips with all of the details in the governance review and the backlash from the section 3 and all the rest of it. And he basically said, he's been pushing that there's real problems, that the province has downloaded a whole lot of issues to the trust in terms of First Nations or First Peoples and negotiating all sorts of housing agreements and all of the matters that they've increased the mandate but they haven't increased any kind of support, either internal in terms of their expertise or financially so that we could. So we're trying to work with a bunch of First Nations peoples and they need help with capacity. We don't have the budget for that. We were given 120,000 and we've blown through that in the first year and we need it ongoing. And just, what to do about getting jurisdiction over the tidal waters and then, getting some help with respect to forestry matters, getting help with different housing objectives and they specifically had, there was the whole thing about Bill 44 specifically had exempted the Islands Trust from those mandates and Salt Springs wants in. So it's figuring out all of those details. So he recommended that with the election coming up and with, depending on who the new minister is and what the letter of instruction would be to a new minister, that we need to use this time now to get ourselves organized to use that to benefit and to try and get on the radar with some significant help. He has, as the MLA representative, he has been, I've never met him before, but all the people from Salt Spring, for instance, are just saying that he's so good and he's just so helpful. He's so on top of it. And he, meets with the ministers and brings it up all the time and makes all sorts of suggestions. So he's opened himself up as being a resource to us. Very, very helpful.
And as far as the code of conduct subcommittee, I mean, it seems like a pretty straightforward task. In terms of, plenty of examples out there. And I think we were mentioning in our conversation that Squamish has taken a pretty firm approach with respect to penalties. And anyway, I guess you'll be kind of
There's, and we don't have the details because now any problems are dealt with through the executive committee. And, we have, different anecdotal, comments in terms of some problems. And, Peter Luckham, the chair, said today that there were a considerable number of complaints that came to executive council. And that there's no resolution other than just saying to somebody, play nice. So, and then part of the discussion today was, whether or not we have blue sky, play nice, or we actually have some sort of negative consequences. And there's a great deal of debate, and it's very, very interesting where the trustees are divided, and who, in my opinion, only my opinion, might be the ones that are generating the most defensive kind of reactions. And it's it's an interesting principle. So the governance committee did not want to be responsible for dealing with it, and had a number of very good suggestions in terms of pros and cons, in terms of putting in different things into amending the staff report. And it's just been golfed over to try and figure out resources and for an elected select committee. So then there'll be some campaigning around that. That also will be interesting.
Councilor Fest?
Just to follow up on the little history book that I passed you there. Towards the end of it, it says, 1974, the province funded 100% of the Islands Trust program. Now, today, the province funds 2%. And so it's now treating the Islands Trust as if it's a regional district. It's supposed to go and find its own money from the residents. And but it doesn't have the powers of a regional district either, let alone the responsibilities. It's quite a different creature. And yet all these crises of climate change and housing are there, and people look to the Islands Trust as their solution through land use planning. So anyway, it's quite challenging. So we'll see what happens. But it's a big committee. Trust Council is 26 people, and elected trustees from various walks of life. And this is a very different Trust Council than the two previous ones.
Okay, seeing no further questions or comments, we will move on to question period. Don't see anybody here in the gallery. No one online. With that, I will look for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilor Getty, seconded by Councilor Saunders. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. That carries. We will take 10 minutes and come back at 3 o'clock.